Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ramadan Kareem, everyone. I hope you're having a very blessed and fruitful Ramadan. We are very honored to have Pari Ansary here with us today. Assalamu alaikum, Pari. Welcome.
How are you all? Thank you for inviting me today.
I'm so happy to have you here. I'm going to give a bit of information about Pari's background. Pari is a naturopathic and holistic practitioner at Pure Earth Healing and has been practicing in the natural health field for over 20 years. She holds a diploma in Naturopathic Herbal Medicine and is also a Unani Tibb Practitioner as well as a hijama therapist. She helps others improve their health and well-being by making simple changes to their diet and lifestyle. She is passionate about preventative healthcare. Pari graduated from the College of Medicine and Healing Arts in Leicester, United Kingdom, with a degree in Naturopathic and Herbal Medicine. She honored to train and work closely with Hakim Salim Khan, who is a world-renowned nutritionist, herbalist, iridologist, and practitioner. She's currently training in aafiyah healing, a modality for trauma and emotional release. So, marhaban, welcome, Pari.
Thank you so much.
So what I'm going to ask you to do, I know that you have a very interesting PowerPoint, a presentation, a slideshow to share. If you could go ahead and do that. Okay, great.
Ramadan Mubarak to you all. And I pray that your Ramadan is all going very well, inshallah. This is a very timely presentation because we're in the blessed month. A lot of things that we are doing in terms of ibadah, eating, lifestyle factors can be also, inshallah, maximized to our best interest, especially in this month. So it's an honor for me to come on today, inshallah, and share some of my beautiful lessons that I've learned throughout the years. I'm training as a practitioner in Unani Tibb Medicine. And we just wanted to look into the perspective of Islamic medicine, because Islamic medicine can also be included in terms of also combining a little bit of Greek medicine, traditional Chinese, Ayurvedic, and even Persian medicine. There was a saying that Abu Musa al-Ashari, who said he heard the Prophet say, Allah created Adam from a handful that he gathered from the entire earth. So the sons of Adam came like the earth. Some of them were red, some of them were white, some are black, and some are in between. Some of them are easy, some of them are difficult, and some are evil, and some are good. And as you can see here, the Quran really describes the process of our own creation and how Allah created us from mud and mixed it with water and then heated and dried it. And then it's no surprise that when we pass away from this earth, we could decompose back into the earth from which we're created. But something very interesting arises from this particular belief, and that is that we're created from the elements of the earth. We all have earth, we all have water, we all have heat, a portion of air, and spirit. That's ruh, that's breath into us. And if you look at books like Healing, for example, The Medicine of the Prophet by Ibn al-Qayyim Jawziyah, rahimahullah, there are 4 constitutions or temperaments that are mentioned for our own bodies, as well as energetics of plants from food. So I'm going to go briefly into it. And Imam Ghazali says beautifully, the heart is that which if a man knows it, he knows himself. And if he knows himself, he knows his Lord. So it's very important to know yourself, no matter what you have encountered in your life through divorce or any type of trials, raising children. Maybe some of you are single parents or you are single parents. It's very difficult to kind of make a new chapter in your life and move forward. If you don't have that understanding of, I know myself. This is how Allah created me. This is who I am. Very, very important to keep that in mind throughout the presentation, because I'm going to be referring back to it.
So could you begin with telling us about what are the various temperaments as they relate to? Okay, there you go.
So we're going to talk in terms of the temperaments. There's different types of humorous quality. Me, in terms of a practitioner, when I treat my clients, when a sister comes in, I look at her temperament first. I look at what kind of humor stands out. So we're going to look at it from that perspective first, and then I'll go into more details in terms of the temperament. So we all, for example, have all 4 humors. We all have a bit of blood. We have a bit of yellow bile that's contained in the liver and the spleen. We all have phlegm, which is located in the lungs. We all have more of the black bile, which is located in the spleen and the pancreas. But we all have a dominant and a subdominant of these 4 humors. Keep in mind, we all have a percentage of all 4, but usually we'll have a very dominant humor that gives us like that energetic, and how we respond to our environment, and then the subdominant. Sometimes people show their subdominant, if they're in particular situations or circumstances more than their dominant. Sometimes people hide their dominant. It is very different from personality. I do want to keep that in mind, because personality, people can change that, but with the temperament, you can't. It is who you are. It's fixated. This is how Allah created you. So let's look at the first dominant blood humor, which is sanguine. It's warm and moist. As you can tell, blood is very warm or hot and moist. It gives us air, vitality, light, activity. The choleric is more of a hot and dry temperament. And their yellow bile has a lot of energy, activity stored in the liver. So it's contained more. People with that particular temperament are more prone to anger, very quick, very sharp. And then you have the phlegmatic, cold and moist, very calm, very passive, very heavy. And then the cold and dry was melancholic, which is earth, very creative, responsive. And they have the black bile humor, which is located in the spleen and the pancreas. I did want to correct myself that the yellow bile is located in the liver, not in the spleen. Mm-hmm. And then there's different methods of treatment. When we look at the temperaments, we look at the principles of Unani Tibb, the doctrines, which I'm not going to get into because there's a big science in itself. But I really want to focus mainly on elements and temperaments today. So like I said, there's earth, fire, air, and water. We all have all four, but we will have a dominant and subdominant. And things can change. So let's say trauma happens in your life. Once you were a very airy person, a very sanguine person as a child, up to your teen years, even up to your 20s. Then something happens in your 30s, some trauma comes, and then you kind of shift. You can move into more of a fire temperament, or you can go down to more of a water temperament. The more balanced you are in your temperament, the more healthier you are in terms of your mind, in terms of your mental capabilities, in terms of your physical strength and your physical health, and even sometimes into your spiritual health. So remember, health will only be maintained as long as the overall quality of the humors is in harmony with the overall quality of the temperament of the individual. The ideal humoral balance is influenced by the 6 lifestyle factors, which we'll get into. And in Unani Tibb, we recognize 6 lifestyle factors. Nowadays, people who are in functional medicine, like Dr. Mark Hyman, most of you probably know him, or in integrative health. Even some doctors now, some MDs are looking into holistic integrative health, and they're constantly looking at these 6 lifestyle factors. But in our tradition, which is so rich, and Hippocrates, who was the father of medicine up to the 17th century, later on up to even after Ibn Sina, when Ibn Sina came and all these other Islamic scientists came, we always looked at the 6 lifestyle factors. Now they're looking at it now, but mashallah, this was a wisdom that was passed on many, many generations ago. And you can look at air environment. Air environment is one of the major lifestyle factors. How is your air? How's your breathing? Breathing is very, very essential to life. Food and drink. Things that you are eating according to your temperament, movement and rest, sleep and wakefulness, and then emotions and anger and feelings, and how it increases certain types of body dispositions, like increases heat, or maybe sometimes if you have people who have a lot of emotional baggage, they're very cold hands and feet. That I see a lot with my aafiyah healing work. Elimination and dehydration, and how it causes stress. Sometimes a lot of women that I see carry their emotions in their womb, for example. They can't eliminate properly. They have constipation issues. We can go into a lot of details in terms of the physical aspects of that, but I'm just giving you a little short, brief history in terms of the lifestyle factors, what we look at. And then the first one is environment, air, and breathing. So when I see a client as a practitioner, I look at their air. How is their air? Are they having good air every day in their homes? Are they having any type of chemicals that they're breathing? Are they using natural things that are, inshallah, healthy for them and their families? Are they going outside? Are they getting fresh air? This is very, very important. If they're in an environment where there's a lot of different types of coldness or dampness, and if they're a cold and damp person, for example, in terms of their temperament, it might not be a suitable place to live. Maybe if they grew up in that particular environment, they adapted to it, that's okay. But let's say somebody comes to me and they're very hot and dry, and where they're located, it's very hot and dry throughout all 4 seasons. It could also throw them off in terms of their temperament. So that can imbalance them in some way. So it's always looking at your environment, your air and breathing, and how you are adjusting to that is very, very crucial to your overall well-being.
So Pari, when you're talking about the air and breathing, does that also include, for example, it's very common in Western lifestyle homes to have products in the home that are very toxic, like whether it's like in air fresheners, Febreze, car fresheners,
Absolutely,
laundry
absolutely. I believe.
detergents, perfumes.
Yes. And they, you know what? A lot of them are endocrine disruptors. So a lot of clients of mine who are women, I treat mainly women and children. They'll say, well, I do burn this, or I do have perfume, or I'll do this. It's okay. Once in a while, it's not going to harm you. But if you're doing it every single day, or you're in a toxic office space or hospital setting that is constantly cleaning with Clorox or bleach or Ajax or all these other chemicals, and you come home and you do the same thing, you're going to disrupt your body's, gut. You're going to disrupt the flora. You're going to disrupt the endocrine system of your body. It's going to create all kinds of hormonal imbalance issues. Your children might develop things like eczema, God forbid, or things like that, and you wonder why they're having these issues. Look at your air, look at your environment. Do you have mold in your home? I recommend also like getting rid of candles that have a lot of like toxic fumes in it. Any type of those Glade plugins, laundry detergent, hand dish soap. During COVID, I saw so many children after COVID, post COVID, because of the hand sanitizer. They developed all kinds of skin rashes and issues. And so it can lead to a host of issues. So I would say be very mindful of your environment. Just because you're not eating something doesn't mean that it's not going to affect you internally. It does have a huge impact on your overall well-being. Make sure that you minimize that. You can't control outside, forces, like if you're in an office setting, like I mentioned, or hospital, when they're burning these things or they're using these chemicals, but you can't control your own environment in your home. So start by making slow changes. I do like a whole course on that, on just, it's called ditch and switch, basically, of toxic chemicals, toxic cleaners and things.
Even house paint, like house paint can have that certain, hair products, etc. It's endless.
Everything you put in. So I remember one of my teachers used to tell us, if you can't eat it, don't put it in your body.
Right.
Simple as that. Yeah. So proper breathing brings better health. I do aafiyah healing, like Sister Samaya mentioned. I teach a lot of my clients how to breathe, because when you have something like trauma, like, you break down, you're divorced, whatever happens in your life, you're going to have some issues in terms of your breathing, your emotions. Breathing is really key. Trying to settle in, try to relax your muscles, remove that tension that's sitting on your back. A lot of women carry a lot of stress and emotions on their back or in their womb or in their stomach areas. And, you really want to release that through proper breathing. So it's really energy. And when the energy is high, the vibration is high. When the vibration is high, you're in a better emotional state. So it's very, very important to really learn how to properly breathe. I know there's YouTube videos on there. I would also recommend looking into Tai Chi or Qigong, which is great for all 4 temperaments, but it rejuvenates the cells. To just give you a little bit of, background information on what breathing does. It regulates the heartbeat, it strengthens the nerves, settles the motions, helps with body, mind integration. A lot of us, unfortunately, we're taught to breathe like just very shallow from our lungs, but the proper breathing, if you ever seen a baby breathe, they breathe properly from their stomach. It contracts, and then it like puffs up like a balloon, and then inhales and exhales. So if you have issues with breathing and you're carrying that stress in your lung area or in your stomach area, go outside, just ground yourself under a tree and learn how to breathe. Let that tree give you some of that oxygen that you really need.
And if I may add to that, because not everyone would understand what grounding is putting your bare feet on the ground, so that you're getting the earth energy. Just as we need sunlight to manufacture vitamin D on the skin, we need earth energy. And data has shown that actually reduces inflammation to
Definitely. And the trees are just amazing, because they can, they say, go hug a tree, go hug a tree.
Yes. And that's what they say. If you can't remove your shoes, which some people can't, then at least touch the tree.
Yes. And grounding is very effective. I have a documentary that I can share with Sister Samaya at the end of this call, that she can share with all of you, that, just 5 minutes to 10 minutes of grounding a day can do wonders for your health, emotional health, physical, everything. And so there was, in that documentary, you'll see it, there was a young lady who mentions her daughter was constantly getting sick. And then somebody told her to put her daughter out in the ground and just bare feet, nothing sometimes even on her body. She started doing that and all her health issues disappeared. So it's very, very effective. Okay, so let's move to sanguine. So sanguine is the first temperament. So some of you might relate to this. Most of our children are sanguine. When you're born, you're usually phlegmatic because you have a lot of water, weight and things. But as you age slowly into your toddler years and into your teen years, and you're very sanguine, you're very airy, you're very warm and moist, very humor blood driven, and sanguine temperaments. I usually like look at the season of spring. So when you look at spring, like now we're entering spring slowly, everything comes to life. So when a sanguine person comes to you, they're very lively, very jovial, very happy, very airy, and they are the element of air. So if you look at air in spring, what happens? You see breezes, you feel wind. They don't stay in one place. For example, wind doesn't just stay in one area. They just, constantly go back and forth. And you also see observing the changes in the spring. Things come to life. Things are more alive and more fully blossomed, and you can see that in a spring person, in a sanguine person. Sanguines can tolerate cold conditions, but they prefer more hot conditions, mild to hot. They tend to have more of the seasonal allergies, colds, and flus if they don't take care of themselves, especially in the winter when they don't take care of themselves, eating properly, going back to the lifestyle factors, the six of those, making sure that they're getting plenty of rest, they're doing things that are good for their self-care. So this is the spring element. And then you look at the choleric, the element of fire, which is hot and dry. And as I mentioned earlier, the yellow bile. Increased heat affects cholerics the most. So summer is really not the right condition or environment for cholerics. They can become very, very prone to having that excess heat exposure can create more heat and imbalance in their bodies. But they work very well in cool, fresh, properly ventilated environments. Areas where they have ACs and things like that. A choleric can benefit more. Summer has a drastic effect on them because summer is very hot and dry.
And cholerics tend to be ones that are managers, like
CEOs of companies, your bosses.
They're very assertive, sharp.
Yes, sir, very sharp. They're very leader oriented. But we sometimes. Now, keep in mind, like, I'm a choleric at home. That's not my dominant, but I am a choleric at home with my children because, you have to take that leadership position. I used to be a teacher many moons ago. So I used to be a very choleric in my teaching, so those certain types of temperaments can, come out of you in certain situations, certain environments. And then you're looking at your phlegmatic, which is your third temperament. And usually babies, like I mentioned, are phlegmatic, but as you age and you get older, like if you ever see, for example, an elderly person, like my father-in-law is hitting 85 now, mashallah, and he's very phlegmatic, very, he used to be choleric when he was growing up and in his 20s and his 30s, way into his probably 60s even. But now that he's in his 80s, he's become more of a phlegmatic, very slow, very passive, and observe the changes that happens in winter. Winter is very calming, very slow, not much noise. People that are very easy to get along with are the phlegmatic temperament. You tell them to do something, they'll do it. They're not as quick and sharp as your choleric or sanguine, but they'll do it because they avoid confrontation. They don't like confrontation. They're very easy people to get along with. They make good counselors. They sometimes make good teachers. The choleric temperament works really well in terms of a relationship with the phlegmatic. If a choleric spouse is, for example, male, and then he's married to a phlegmatic woman, they work really well together in terms of that relationship, as you can see in the dynamics. And then the sanguine works really well as well with the phlegmatic. Phlegmatics are very easy to get along. It's a more calming nature type of temperament. And then your melancholy is your element of earth, and the dominant, the season to be associated with this is autumn or fall. And they're very, as you can see here in autumn and fall, it's very cold and dry. You're very kind of dying. The phlegmatic, melancholic temperament is somebody who is more exposed to illnesses because if they don't take care of themselves, especially eating the proper foods that are not so cold and drying, staying in good warmer climates are very beneficial, and taking care of themselves emotionally, because this particular temperament, if trauma happens to them, it can affect them to the point that it can cause a lot of imbalance in terms of mental health.
They're very much in their head. They think
very, very much into their heads. Yeah, very logical, but very analytical as well. So they live in their heads. Very perfectionist beings as well. Melancholics are very perfectionists. They tend to be more introverted. I failed to mention the two first ones that I mentioned, the sanguine choleric are more extroverted. And then you have your melancholic and your phlegmatic, the more introverted, more passive. So observe the changes in the fall. What happens? You know, it's very beautiful outside. Things are very quiet, very kind of passive. The melancholic temperament is very earth, very grounded. They don't like changes. They don't like schedule disrupted. They're very into the rhythm and flow of things.
And they are very much the artists, writers.
Yes, more philosophers, poets. Mm-hmm. And now I'm going to go into eating for your temperament, and then I'm going to go into details about that. So we talked about the 4 seasons. And then Hippocrates said, leave your drugs in the chemist pot if you can heal the patient with food. Food is very important, especially if you're going through issues and things like that. How do you balance your emotional? Sometimes people eat emotionally. Sometimes people don't eat at all when they're stressed or they're going through trauma. So it's very important to really balance your life with good, proper food that's going to heal you. Let food be thy medicine, medicine be thy food, as Hippocrates mentioned. Most illnesses, even those which lead the sufferer to the specialist, arise solely from long continued errors of diet and regimen, which is very important, quoted by Ibn Sina. I see this all the time in my practice with women and children who are dealing with all kinds of issues. And I look at their food diary. I take an intake form of a 3-day food diary to see what they're eating in terms of their health, and also looking at their temperaments. And then if they're eating a lot of things that are really not good for them, then I make changes, inshallah, and hopefully it'll help them. A good and proper diet in disease is worth 100 medicines, and no amount of medication could do a patient who does not observe a strict regimen of diet. That's put by Charta.
So to be clear, you have these 4 temperaments, and each one requires different things to put them into balance. So the foods might be different, the lifestyle would be different. And if a person doesn't adhere to those things, they can be totally out of balance and then leads to other health issues.
And that's where you find health lost. When health is lost, that means that that person is completely imbalanced in their temperament. So you really want to try as much as you can to stick to things. Now, obviously, everybody will have cheat days, or there'll be days that you can't do everything. But as much as you can, observe it. Like last night, I was invited for iftar. Somebody served some eggplant. I know eggplant is not good for me in terms of my temperament. It's cold and dry. And I had to reject that. You know, I knew it's not going to really be good for me. So I didn't eat that. So now that I understand this stuff, I can actually say, I can't eat this. I'm sorry. Or, you know, be respectful and stuff, but eat something else, you know, for example. So principles for healthy eating for all temperaments. Meals should be eat regularly and on time. I go into details about that. Important to chew food properly, very important in Ayurvedic and the Tibb tradition, as well as Chinese medicine. One should not eat as much as one feels heavy and ill. Food should be cooked properly. Important balanced spices. I do a class on spices and herbs according to your temperament. Important to have a sense of variety in foods, eating, including different tastes. The tastes are very important. In Unani Tibb medicine, we have 9 different types of tastes. Resting after lunch. I know in other countries in the Muslim world and Mediterranean climates like Greece and other places, they do take a siesta. In Spain and other places like that. Unfortunately, here in America, we live in a very rigid lifestyle where we wake up in the morning, we work, and then we come home at 5, eat our dinner kind of late, and there's no rest in between. So it's really not healthy. But if you can take a little afternoon nap, especially for certain types of temperaments, like your choleric, like your melancholic, like your sanguine, very effective for them to take an afternoon nap. 5 to 10 minutes of power nap.
Might interject that if we don't have the time, because we just have such busy lifestyles, if people can't do that, I just read recently that it's important to take pause before you eat and to do some deep breathing, and to, like, even if it means putting your hand on your stomach and to like focus on the digestive juices, you know, being there.
Yeah, so digestion actually begins before you put the first morsels of food in your mouth. Digestion when you look at the food and you make the intention that I'm going to eat this for the sake of Allah, because Allah provided this, being grateful for the food. But energetics, you know, look at food as energetics for your body to sustain you, to give you more ibadah, to give you more energy. Don't just eat because I have to eat, you know, it's like a mundane intention. But if you make the intention that I'm eating this for the energetics of food, to give me energy to serve Allah, to do better as a mother, to do better as a wife, or, you know, in most cases, like as a good person, as a good sister, as a good contributor in society, as a good fellow, you know, worker, whatever, then do it like that. You know, make that intention that you can heal yourself through the food, emotionally, mentally, physically. It's going to give you that good spiritual sustenance to give you that drive to go ahead and move forward in your life. So look at food as like something as a rich source that's going to give you that energy. And like Sister Samaya mentioned, being mindful, being present, not looking at your phone, not listening to TV or whatever, or looking at your Instagram page or whatever while you're doing the eating, but being mindful, being present, eating in a very tranquil state and position that you are in, be very, very better. It's better for your digestion as well. So people with sanguine temperaments always feel hot. They have a moist skin and hydrous and strong hair. You can find them a very robust in terms of their muscular stature. They're very strong in terms of like the features of their face. Their eyes tend to be usually big, curly hair. Sometimes you can see that's a dominant feature in a sanguine temperament. Very active, very passive. They walk in a room, everybody knows them, very popular. They tend to kind of skip jobs. For example, they'll have interest in, for example, let's say one day they pick up art, and the next day they pick up sewing, and the next day they pick up how to fly a kite, so they have different, and the children are like that. They have different types of interests. Explore that with your children. So if your child is a sanguine, give them different types of things where they can be creative. Don't keep them in one position because you want them to be a certain way. Try to work with them in terms of their temperament. Very energetic, very active, very optimistic and positive. They're very confident, very outgoing, very social. If you have a sanguine child, they don't like to clean their rooms as much. So they usually invite a friend to come help them to clean their rooms to motivate them. So you find different types of features like that in sanguines. And the group of people with sanguine temperaments are at risk for cardiovascular disease, stroke. They could also, because they eat, they should eat more cold to warming foods that can lower their blood pressure as well. Foods that are like more salads and greens and things like that. Juicing is very effective for a sanguine temperament. So I go into a little bit of details in terms of that. You can see here, leafy greens, berries, dairy, fruits will be helpful for them. Sanguine temperaments should avoid fast foods, fried foods. All the temperaments should avoid that, all of us. Carbs, soda, spicy food. They should have a low Mediterranean diet. The prophetic medicine is actually the prophetic foods.
Sorry, low meat? I think you said low Mediterranean, low meat diet.
No, low meat diet. Yeah, excuse me, low meat diet. Not too many high, especially red meat is not really effective for the sanguine. So they should have maybe meat. I would say for sanguine, when I see sanguine, maybe once or twice a week they can have meat like chicken or lamb, or I usually tend to discourage red meat in terms of beef. Don't eat too much beef. It's not really healthy. Once in a while it's okay, but lamb, goat, chicken, maybe once or twice a week for sanguine would be the best, but no more than that. And then, so they should consume more protein from seafood and legumes, less from carbs, as well as more fruit and vegetables. They ensure that their fat intake is minimal. They should preferably drink cool water, avoid excessive sugar, rich fatty foods, and excessive meat consumption. Like I mentioned, seafood is better suited for them. Salmon, things like salmon, mackerel, sardines, trout, those type of fish are really good for sanguines. Moderation eating habits is essential to avoid metabolic illnesses. Intermittent fasting is really recommended for a sanguine temperament. Sanguines do really well with fasting as well. And they should consume more cooling, somewhat drying foods. And then I go into details about some of the foods. This might take a long time, but this could be cold and dry foods that sanguine could be beneficial for them, but it would aggravate the melancholic temperament. So it's good for a sanguine, but it might not be good for melancholic. Just for that. Okay, so choleric are people with dry skin, usually wavy hair, yellow skin color usually. They usually get mad quickly, calm down quickly as well. Constipation in most cases of choleric, excessive thirst and dry mouth, energetic, goal-oriented, leadership power. It gives them that drive, that force. They like to take charge. You put a circle of kids together and you immediately spot the choleric. They kind of like, let's do this, let's play this, let's do that, choleric child. Or you put, in an organization of some sort, you see the choleric taking the leading role. They tell people do this and that. They tend to have that leadership power, that leadership charge. And you also find them, starting projects, their company, in terms of companies, goal-oriented. They tend to be less empathetic than the other temperaments. So Cholerics can just move on. Like fire, if you observe fire, it just rapidly, sways back and forth. There's low fire, there's medium, there's high. So choleric temperaments, if trauma happens to them, they can try to move on, but they need to have more of alone time to observe and be more, what is it called? You can tend to be so much with people a lot that you forget to remind yourself that, you need self-care, you need to stop, you need to rest, because choleric people have a hard time resting. They have a hard time relaxing. And so self-care for them is like not, they don't really take that time alone to kind of reflect, to kind of have that alone me time. So it's very important for this temperament to balance themselves in terms of observing self-care and making sure that they are relaxing, making sure that they are taking breaks every now and then. This group should not overeat. They should also reduce eating sweets, high fiber vegetables. Although I would never tell a choleric woman or a man to stop eating sweets, like too much of it. Too much of it is not good, but every now and then they need that. So I recommend things like coconut sugar as a replacement of white sugar, honey. They can have honey, dates, natural sugar, and jaggery. Jaggery is also really good, which is pure cane sugar or juice. High fiber vegetables such as lettuce, squash, spinach, peas are recommended. They should avoid eating too much garlic, onion, spicy things like cayenne pepper, black pepper can really imbalance a choleric temperament. Fried foods as well. Red meat, pistachios, coconut, walnuts can also, too much of it. Every now and then it's okay, but too much of it every single day. And I forget to mention ginger as well is one of those things that can really imbalance it. Choleric temperament. So just because you read an article about ginger being good for, this and that doesn't mean it's good for suitable for every body type. So keep in mind when you understand your body type or temperament that's unique to you, you don't want to have excess of those things. Doesn't mean that you can't have it every now and then. You put a little bit of garlic with your food, and then you can change the constituent or the quality of garlic by adding other things in it. So you're kind of masking that strong, rich, heated property of garlic. You're masking with other things like vegetables and stuff that can also be very helpful for your choleric temperament. So we go into useful foods for choleric temperament, a little bit more details: apples, lettuce, peas, squash, zucchini, pumpkin, which the processed some love, very, very beneficial. Peaches, apples, cucumbers. As you can see here, chicken, yogurt, very cooling. Dairy itself is very cooling for the sanguine and for the choleric, like cold milk, yogurt, very beneficial. If you're mixing yogurt with other things in it, you can change the temperament of the yogurt so it's not cold and damp, which would also be good for the other two temperaments, which is the phlegmatic and the melancholic.
What do you mean if you warm the yogurt? Is that what you
Not
mean?
warm it, but if you mix it with like honey, which is more warming, or you mix it with like some spices, like cumin seeds, you put black seeds in it. It's not so much cold temperature straight from the fridge. You put it in the room a little bit to keep it like warming. Mix it with other foods, like if you mix your yogurt with soup or something like that, you can change that temperament, obviously, of that particular type of food. And then food and drinks, cholerics should avoid excessive salt, salty foods, high fats, fried foods, vinegar, sour, fermented foods, hot spices, excessive red meat intake as well. They should include more milk, dairy products, cold drinks, fruit and vegetables. Now keep in mind, we're in the winter. We're slowly entering into the spring. So because we're in the winter, nothing cold should be good for any of the temperaments. So straight cold drinks or iced cold drinks, it's not good for any of us. Just because it's not good for our digestive repair. So you should have more room temperature if you're choleric, not so much hot, but room temperature. Whereas the melancholic, the phlegmatic, would actually benefit from more warming to hot drinks rather than completely cold. And then the choleric, slightly warm would be more beneficial in the winter. They should ensure adequate to extra water intake. Hydration is very important because they can, like I said, rapidly sweat. And then because of that, they lose like their fluid. So water is very essential for the choleric, for all four temperaments, but especially for the choleric. They should eat slow and not eat while working, concentrating in a relaxed state, because they do have digestive issues, more digestive issues if they're constantly on the go and they're not eating effectively and not being present while they're eating. Fruits and vegetables, especially seasonal, are very beneficial. Choleric should eat more cooling, moisturizing foods and less hot, drying foods. And then some of the examples of cold and moist foods, we have fruits, vegetables, dairy, grains, licorice, sage, fennel, peppermint, and hibiscus. Now moving on to the phlegmatic, they have more of a softer skin, very plump. They have good types, low volume of hair, sometimes more hair loss. They tend to be more of a bigger weight. They're very calm, very chill, easygoing, unassuming, reliable, intuitive, considerate. Most of them suffer from arthritis, ovarian cysts, a lot of cysts, things like that, because a lot of phlegm in the body. And phlegm and boils can lead to other kinds of diseases. Delayed menstruation in women, sinus issues. And remember, the phlegmatic tends to have excess phlegm in their lungs. So they do tend to have seasonal allergies more, just like the sanguine. Headaches, asthma, by neglecting their diet. By following a proper diet, this group with phlegmatic temperament can bring their body to balance and stability and stay healthy. Due to the fact that their temperament is moist and cold, they should eat things with hot and dry nature. The best vegetables for phlegmatic temperament are mint, parsley, basil, bell peppers, and celery. Obviously, you cook those things. Beneficial foods, some of them that I mentioned. Pepper, cinnamon, saffron is very good. I actually also want to say saffron is also very, very good for a choleric, because saffron keeps the choleric very calm, and it's really good for the nervous system. So making like a saffron drink, which is on my website, you can make the elixir in the evenings, give it to the phlegmatic, give it to the melancholic, give it to the choleric. It really helps with their, even for trauma, people who have been through trauma or tribulations and they're just not happy, they're depressed or have a lot of anxiety. Saffron is an amazing herb to give them. It actually keeps the heart very happy. As well as I didn't mention talbina, the process I mentioned. There's a hadith about talbina where Aisha radiallahu anha mentioned that give talbina for anybody who has anxiety or depression.
So
It's very good for
yeah,
the
what is Talbina?
Talbina is barley. So it's
Okay.
basically barley. You mix it with some milk, and it's really good for depression and anxiety. And you just take a husk barley. So you would take like the barley powder and you mix that. You can make that into like a soft powder. And it's really good to make it with dates. And you can
Kind of
put a
like
little
a
bit of
porridge.
honey in it, and you can put cinnamon in it. You can also make it with nut milk, like almond milk. I make my talbina with almond milk or coconut milk. It's basically barley porridge. My teacher Hakim Salim taught us to basically roast the barley and then with some olive oil, and then basically grind the barley into a powder, and then make the porridge out of that. It's kind of like oatmeal, but it's with barley. So the hadith correctly states Aisha radiallahu anha would often make talbina to treat those who are sick, grieving over the deceased, any type of grief that's especially sitting in your lungs or in your heart, and experiencing anxiety, depression. Tahini, ginger, and turmeric is also very good for the phlegmatic. Walnut, raisins, pistachios, dried figs, dried dates, peanuts. I don't usually recommend peanuts, but you can do almonds. It's, might be better than peanuts.
Yeah, because peanuts could have traces of mold.
Yeah, mold and fungus. Mm-hmm. And then food and drink, dairy products, refined carbs. I've seen a lot of people with phlegmatic temperaments, women, they tend to love dairy. I was doing hijama the other day, last week, on somebody who was very phlegmatic. I could see it from her blood when I was doing the hijama. And I asked her, I said, you eat a lot of cheese and, consume a lot of dairy products. She goes, I love cheese. I have to have it every day. So I could definitely see she was already phlegmatic, and her blood, when I was doing the hijama, you could see that. But I would recommend for that particular person, I said, just lower your intake of dairy products, because you're creating a lot of phlegm in your body. And you could see that through the blood. There was a lot of phlegm. Even carbs, like a lot of white bread, white rice, can actually really imbalance the phlegmatic temperament. They can become more slow, more sluggish. I also see a lot of women having non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, because they're eating a lot of these type of products, and they're already phlegmatic, and then the liver gets, very stagnant with excess amounts of these types of food products. So you should avoid that. Ice cream, creamy, richy foods, cream, butter, yogurt, all that for now, just in moderation, it's okay, but not as everyday thing. In this case of this woman that I did hijama on, she was consuming cheese every day in the morning, and then with bread. And so obviously, she's having a lot of health issues as a result. They digest meat easily. However, they should consume more chicken and fish. They should include more hot and spicy foods in their diet, eat more warm, drying foods, really good teas like ginger tea, peppermint tea would be good. Not peppermint tea, but more like a
Is
peppermint.
peppermint cooling? Is that
Yeah,
what?
not peppermint. No, no, not peppermint. I was thinking about there's another lemon balm. Lemon balm is really good for the phlegmatic. Ginger. You can also do things like saffron tea. You can do like a nice rich tea, green tea with some honey in it to give that heating quality of the green tea. So you can do different types of teas, but they benefit more of a hot tea type, hot tea after a meal, which helps with their digestion as well and helps them to stay like their weight and their optimum weight, not gaining weight rapidly after a big meal.
Mm.
Warm and drying foods, room temperature fruits, roasted vegetables, fermented chicken, fish, lamb in moderation. Spice teas, like I mentioned, you can do cinnamon, you can do a cayenne pepper tea with some maybe honey and ginger, rose, dates, black seed. Melancholic features. People with melancholic temperaments have a quite sensitive and thoughtful character. They tend to be more of the skinny type, wavy, brittle hair, a little bit more of depressed, sad look on their faces, dry, darker skin, detail oriented. That's not say everybody that's melancholic looks like that, but I'm just giving you an example of what somebody with a melancholic temperament can look like. Their shoulders are not as broad as your choleric and your sanguine because they don't have like that extra vitality, that blood or that yellow bile that gives it that characteristic. They have more of that excess black bile, which gives them more of like, sunken shoulders, or like they'll have like more of a skinnier frame. The group of people with melancholic tempers have dry skin. They should keep their skin moist with lotions. They should get enough sleep at night, not during the day as much. Also, they should avoid looking too much at the cell phones and computer screens. It's useful for them to drink liquids with a few drops of lemon. That can also help them. People with melancholic tempers should avoid
So they have too much bile. Is that what you're saying?
yellow bile. I mean, not yellow bile, black bile. Yeah.
Yeah, the reason I ask is because I heard recently that for vitamin D absorption, one should actually take it with Tudka, which is bile. So I don't know if you know about that. Like, is that, would you
I
not
don't know about that. Yeah, I don't know much about that.
Okay.
Um, Things like, for example, cabbage, white rice, vinegar, beef is probably should be avoided for the melancholic. Eggplant. After eating sour and cold food, they should eat 2 spoons of honey if they are going to eat those type of things to balance, because honey is more warming and moisturizing. If you like to eat rice, you could add some cumin to it, add some more spices, ginger. You can obviously change the quality of the rice if you add other things to it, curries and things like that. The best vegetables: parsley, basil, mint. If you put in tea, for example, coconut water, apple juice, fresh apple juice, carrot juice, and room temperature to warm would be better for the melancholic temperament, as you can see here. I'm just going to skim through these because it's I want to leave some question and answer time. They should avoid cold foods, excessive beans. Phlegmatics and melancholics, they don't do well with stale food or like food that's 2 to 3 days old. So you really want to be careful if you are these types of temperaments or body types, that you're having fresh food daily. Leftovers, they don't do well, melancholics, and neither do the phlegmatics, because it can really have a negative impact on their digestion. A lot of flatness, like gas, can come out from that. So you really want to avoid excessive like how many times you're eating in terms of like leftover foods. Or I'm not saying if you refrigerate, not refrigerate, but if you freeze it, it's okay. You warm it up over the stove, it's okay. But if you're having like food from the refrigerator 2, 3 days old, it can definitely impact your digestion. Excessive tea, coffee, sour should be avoided as well, because tea again is a diuretic. In some cases, like if you're having cold, like hot and dry teas a lot, that drying effect can really imbalance you.
But herbal teas are good, right? You mean like
Yeah, herbal teas, like if you mix honey with it, it's perfect. Or you mix like some sort of coconut milk, or you do almond milk to give that moisturizing effect, you can definitely do that. So some of the examples that things that melancholics should eat: steamed baked vegetables, oats, quinoa, buckwheat, soups, stews, lemon balm, melissa tea, very good because it's good for the nervous system. It's very calming, especially if they're falling into depression and stuff like that. It's really good to kind of give them that mood upliftment. Rose is good for, I think, all temperaments. Ghee is more warming and moisturizing. Tahini, consuming warm, hot soups and broths, foods that help with that heat content will really, really good, especially in the winter season, because melancholics can become very depressed if they're already it's cold and dry outside or cold and wet. And so not eating the proper foods to balance their temperament can really affect them even more during, like, they can fall into seasonal depression, for example, and things like that. So sensible eating guideline, if it's very overwhelming, you just like, it's very hard for you to kind of pick different things. In my family, we have all kinds of different temperaments. So for me, what I do is I just adjust the spices. I cook the same types of food, but I just adjust the size spices. For example, I would need more cayenne pepper than my husband would, or my children would. So I just add the cayenne pepper to my own dish rather than making it as a whole thing in a pot. So you can adjust it according to your family's temperaments. But just in a general guideline, just try to eat sensibly, eat more fruits and vegetables if you can. You don't want to fall victim to like things like takeaways and like all kinds of preservatives and processed foods and things that have natural flavors. Like if you can't pronounce it, I usually generally tell people stay away from things like seed oils, canola oil, vegetable oil, corn oil, any hydrogenated oils. You definitely want to avoid for every single temperament. It's good for all of us that you should avoid all of that. More things you can swap to is olive oil, avocado, coconut, ghee, in some cases butter. You can also do grapeseed oil. Those are probably more the healthier options. And then salts, try to avoid white salt, iodized salt. You can do pink salt, you can do Celtic salt, and anything that has like box, spices, like, your Sean mixes and stuff like that, you should avoid because it has a big high MSG content, which is not good for anybody. Fruits should usually be eaten generally before a meal. The only fruit that I do recommend if you're having digestive issues, particularly if you're a melancholic or phlegmatic temperament, that you can have after a meal that can help you is papaya and mangoes. Those are the two fruits that you can have after a meal. One should not drink with meals as it affects digestion. The choleric is an exception. Sometimes cholerics do need to drink a little bit with their meals because they're always, hot and dry. And so if the food is very hot and dry and they're sweating, drinking a little bit of water is not going to harm them. It can actually help them. Never eat food that is very hot or dry or very cold. Of the 3 meals, essential have breakfast if you can, an early dinner regularly. If you miss a meal, you can miss lunch. Or maybe have like a late breakfast that can kind of turn into a lunch. That could be very effective for you. Never suppress your hunger with coffee or tea. Drink water, that's better and healthier, and only eat when you feel hungry. So movement and rest, very important for all 4 temperaments. Sanguines, they more benefit from like brisk walking, jogging, aerobics, doing some resting between. They should avoid strenuous exercise for prolonged periods. Cholerics, the best type of exercise is brisk walking, qigong, tai chi. Not going to a gym late in the night to sweat more and create more heat in the body is probably not recommended for choleric. Things that are more like very, very low pace would be very effective because they're always fast paced, and you don't need to go in a gym and like weight lifting and things. And occasion it's okay, maybe once a week or twice a week. But for the most part, just a brisk walk would be very effective for a choleric, because you don't want that anger to also rise up as well. Phlegmatic, unnecessary resting, napping should be avoided because they tend to be more slow. They don't like to move. The 2 temperaments they don't like to move are the phlegmatic and melancholic. So you have to kind of engage them, maybe have a walking partner. But this aerobics, weight training would be more beneficial for the phlegmatic more than the choleric and the sanguine. And then melancholic as well. Brisk walking in nature, touching plants would be very effective. I don't really recommend yoga, but I put that there if you're into yoga, it's fine. But Pilates is probably better. Pilates or bar, some sort of stretching, Tai Chi. I also recommend for all temperaments. Tai Chi, Qigong is very, very good, but especially for the choleric and the melancholic. And then sleep and wakefulness. Each temperament has different needs for sleep. Individuals who are phlegmatic and sanguine require less sleep, whereas those who are choleric and melancholic require more sleep. In ancient time, those people who understood the self-discipline pattern themselves upon the yin and the yang, and they lived in harmony. There was a temperance in eating and drinking. Their hours of rising, retiring were regular and not disorderly and wild. So I always tell people when I do this workshop, if you're more closer to the sunnah, to the fitra, to the sunnah of the prophetic way, then the more fitra and more balanced you are. Pasasam would sleep at night, wake up early in the day, do his work. Nowadays, we stay up till 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning, looking at our phones and doing most of our projects and things like that. And I know that more of the sanguine and the phlegmatic are notorious for that because they like to be night owls, whereas the melancholic and the phlegmatic less. But really have an order to your day, a rhythm. Wake up in the early morning where you catch the spring. My teacher, Hakim Salim, used to tell us that if you want the blessing in the day, wake up early in the morning, do tahajjud, go outside before the sun comes up. That first light you should see is not your phone or computer, it's that light of the sun. It helps with sleep repair. How many people have sleeping issues that can't sleep at night because the first light they see is their phones and the last light they see is their phones, and that's affecting their melatonin in their bodies. It's really affecting their sleep. So there's all kinds of sleeping issues. You can have the best diets and you can have the best supplements, but if you're not sleeping, your body's not cleansing itself. And in Unani Tibb medicine and ancient Chinese medicine, between the hours 11 and 2, your body's repairing itself, it's resetting itself. Your brain is cleaning itself from the toxins of the day and everything like that. So if you're not sleeping, that's not doing the repair and rest that it needs to. Outside of Ramadan has its own special barakah, but when we can, you have to start your day early, wake up, do your breathing at that time, do your dhikr, turn to Allah in the midnight, ask Allah to help you through your emotional tribulations and issues, and you'll find the immense blessing in the day. But if you're up all night and you're just pondering, pacing back and forth, that can really affect your day, and it can really affect the rhythm of the day. And so you're not getting that proper restoration that you need to kind of move on and be more balanced. So I'm going to kind of probably skip this because there's a lot of in terms of sleeping, because it's beneficial for everybody, but we can maybe address it at a later point. I do want to talk about emotional balance and mental balance. It's very important to have a daily routine, praying 5 times a day, creating special habits for yourself, habit stacking. It takes 40 days to create a habit, creating like a ritual where you're reciting no matter what a certain verse of Quran, like, or a chapter of Quran, Yasin, for example, if you're going through some hard times with intention of Allah lifting the burden from you. Any spiritual litanies, if you're working with a sheikh or you have a sheikh that can give you something, maybe Ya Latif 100 times a day. Salawat is the most effective. La ilaha illallah, 100 times, salawat 100 times, good for all temperaments. But maybe for the sanguine choleric, they need that more because they are always with people, they get their energy from people. But having alone time is very effective for them, just to ground themselves, to be present in the moment, not always with people, not getting their energy from people, but also just reflecting on their own selves, and creating that habit of just alone time. The phlegmatic, the melancholic are better at that because they love to be more alone rather than being with people because they get their energy from being alone. But creating some sort of spiritual habit every day and not leaving it is very, very important. Start with a few salawat, maybe work your way up to 100 a day if you can, and then increasing it to 500, and then eventually your goal will be 1,000 a day or whatever you can do that's consistent. So don't do too much. I'm going to do 1,000 a day and you leave it. Do 20 a day, then increase it to 50 the next week, and then the week after that 100. As long as you're doing something to create that spiritual habit for yourself, because that is very, very important when you're going through a divorce or when you're going through something that's difficult. A new chapter in your life is starting, so you have to create that me time so that you're always reflecting on your own self and how you can better yourself, not worrying about other people and he or she did this or whatever, but rather looking within your own self, being introspective. So daily meditation, breathing, spiritual practice, regular guided seclusion, ensuring a balance between your spiritual life and social activities and responsibilities. Good reminder, you're a spiritual being and a traveler in the dunya. And this is just a resting place. Sanguine, stress and emotions, very excessive excitement, worry. They're more prone to anger, emotional excesses, or detrimental to them. So they love to be with people when a life crisis does hit them, such as a divorce. They like to have that friend, a close friend, or they'll like to kind of relay their story to them. And that talking therapy can work for the sanguine. That could be effective. But they also need, like I said, downtime. Relaxation techniques like deep breathing, meditation, visualization are very beneficial. I do visualization techniques with my clients who have had trauma. I just walk them through just a safe space, closing theirs. If we had enough time, I could have done that with all of you today, but maybe just closing your eyes and imagining a safe place. I say, imagine a place where you go to, where you feel relaxed, where you feel that harmony, where you feel calm, where your breathing is not shallow, but very, very natural. where you're feeling very peaceful, very calm, very anchored, very grounded. And only people that are invited by you are allowed to enter that safe space. Now, some people can create, very imaginary places in their head. Some people can maybe create something in their childhood home, or maybe a park somewhere, or maybe a place where they feel secure, or maybe a person's with them where they feel comfort with, a grandmother or grandfather that's has deceased. So I do a lot of this with my patients who have had trauma, and that could be beneficial as well. But sanguines especially need these type of things because they're always with people. They don't have time for themselves to kind of, let me take a step back and reflect on the past year. What could I have done to make it better, or what could I have done to perfect myself and make it myself better? So having moments of silence, alone time, reflection is very important for this dominant temperament. And then choleric, stress and emotions, extreme emotions of anger, irritability, excessive speech, suppression of anger are most harmful for this kind of temperament because they need to kind of take it out. So they tend to go sign up in a gym or weight lifts and things like that because they're kind of stressed out. They don't, and that could be beneficial for them. But doing, again, meditation, breathing, walking in the park, in the forest would be very beneficial to kind of relax them. Because this temperament, like I mentioned earlier, has less empathy. You really need to work with this temperament in terms of like, what can you have done to become better? Look at the other person in their shoes. Sometimes they have difficulty imagining that. So even a visualization technique can also help this temperament. Phlegmatic, the fear, shyness, depression, self-pity, or emotional excesses for this temperament. Counseling would be beneficial for them. Talk therapy, breathing exercises, prayer as medicine are essential during emotional distress. And then melancholic, again, feelings of loneliness, grief, depression, being overly philosophical may have a negative impact, especially if prolonged, unresolved, or excessive. If it's not dealt with. Good spiritual prayer, deep breathing, being with a good friend, a close friend, because melancholics like to be by themselves a lot, can really be helpful during this trying time. So I'm not going to go through retention and elimination, but
Emotions. Pardon.
I'll just end it with this. The most evenly balanced of all temperaments in the animal kingdom are temperament of man. The most evenly balanced of all temperaments in mankind is the temperament of the believer. And the most evenly balanced temperament among the believers are the temperaments of the prophets. The most evenly balanced of temperaments of all the prophets are the temperaments of the messengers of Allah. And the most evenly balanced of those in the temperament of the prophet, of the temperament, is the Prophet Sallallahu. So if we look at the Prophet Sallallahu, he was the most complete perfection of all four. He was able to be strong and courageous at all times, but he also had that moment where he was very empathetic, very soft, very sweet, very kind-natured. So we want to adapt that. We want to look at that as our model, and we want to move forward in our lives by, inshallah, being balanced in our temperaments. And like I mentioned in the beginning, if you're more closer to the sunnah, you're more closer to your fitrah. So, and that's it.
Thank you so much. So to elaborate on the last section that you covered, which was about emotions. So you mentioned certain lifestyle things people can do, but do you have any recommendations for example, remedies that one can use for grief, mourning, loss?
Yeah. So for grief and mourning, rose essential oil would be really good on the heart. You can also diffuse it. You can also have rose tea. Rose and saffron together. I know the Persians in Iran, they do like a saffron rose mix. And where I'm from in Afghanistan, we do a lot of rose and saffron too.
When you say rose, you mean like using rose petals?
Yeah, dried rose petals. You can do rose, the rose water. You can mix rose water with like maybe put a little bit of that in your tea. Saffron, like I mentioned on my website, there's a saffron elixir drink. You can put more cinnamon if you're more of a colder temperament, less cinnamon if you're more of a warmer temperament, but putting some of the saffron with a nut milk of your choice, or even with water. You can drink that as a warming tea. You can put also a little bit of cardamom, some honey if you want to sweeten it, or jaggery. And that can be really good in consoling your heart and creating some happy feelings, some mood upliftment. Some of the spices that I recommend or herbs are lemon balm, melissa, verbena, which is also another essential oil. You can do the herb that can help with the grief and the loss. And eating good things like lentils is also good because lentils are very comforting. Legumes are very comforting. I think there's a hadith Aisha radiallahu anha mentions about grief and how, eating lentils is good for that. And like I said, talbina is really good because you can have it in a savory form or a sweet form with honey.
Okay.
And black seed. I think black seed oil is very good for all of us, but in moderation for the hotter temperaments, the warmer. I would maybe do less chewing, like maybe about 2 to 3 black seeds for cholerics and sanguines. If you're mixing with honey, it can change that temperament. But for the melancholic and for the phlegmatic, maybe a little bit of a handful of black seeds mixed with some warm water and some honey would be beneficial.
But they just eat it like
Yeah, just eat it. It's
Sure.
very good for just balancing your misaj, just balancing. It's just prophetic medicine.
It would be better than the
I also
oil?
wanted to mention Kusta Hindi. Kusta Hindi is another prophetic medicine that I do treat people with. I tend to find that it benefits more of those that are phlegmatic, cold.
What is
Nature.
that?
It's Kusta Hindi. It's like a very dry herb. Let me share with you the screen for that. I can get that. Okay, so you can see my screen, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so this is what it looks like, Kusta Hindi.
Oh, wow. Where do you get that?
And there's white kus, which is referred to as sea kus, and there's Indian kus, which is hotter. While white kus is softer than Indian kus, and both the former and the latter are highly beneficial. Really good for sinuses. So I'm just going to read you the hadith. I went to the Prophet with a son of mine whose palate and tonsils I had pressed with my fingers a treatment for a throat and tonsil disease. I'm assuming strep throat or sore throat of that type, of that nature. The Prophet said, why do you pain your children by pressing their throats? Use al-Hindi, which is certain incense, Kusta Hindi, for its cure 7 diseases, one of which is pleurisy. It is used as a snuff for treating throat and tonsil disease, and it's inserted into one side of the mouth of one suffering from pleurisy. So this is what it looks like. I worked with a herbalist a long time ago from Saudi, and she used to make her own Kusta Hindi, and she used to put in a gauze, and she used to give it to her patients and have them inhale it. It's phenomenal for any type of sinus, chronic sinus issues, for strep throat. You can also mix it with water, and it's amazing, mashallah. So you can also do the black seed.
Where can one get this?
You can get it from Etsy. I've seen some local herbal shops at Etsy. Yeah.
Okay. So, and is there something different for anger and resentment?
Yeah, it's very cooling. Really good for that too. Yeah.
Okay, so you're saying that when you mentioned the lemon balm and all of those, that was for grief and loss and sadness?
And even lemon balm. Lemon balm is good for relaxing nervous system, so it's really good for anger as well.
Okay, so the anger would be the lemon balm as well?
Yeah, lemon balm, melissa,
Okay.
any type of you can do like a lemon balm tincture. Have you seen the alcohol-free ones? I know there's vimergy.com. They sell the lemon balm tinctures. I recommend it for certain like cholerics that are having some, anger issues and things like that. That's also very good. For sanguines as well, it's good. You can make lemon balm tea as well. Chamomile is also really good for cooling down the anger. Chamomile, lavender, those are type of the herbs that I recommend.
And what about for those people who just say, oh my goodness, this is just too much. I've got such an unhealthy lifestyle. I wouldn't even know where to begin. Do you have any recommendations for people like that?
Start slow. Just do a few. And, now that if you know your temperament, work with your temperament, try to incorporate more soups and broths. If you're more of a colder temperament, more of a warming temperament, you want to create more salads and Mediterranean types of dishes, more of the prophetic types of food that the process you see, like cucumbers and dates or watermelon dates. Mixing your different types of foods, but slowly start small. Work with your hydration, work with your managing your emotions, and with your emotions, for example, taking like teas, like we mentioned earlier, you can do some of that. And then working with your a physical, exercise, walking every day if you can, Tai Chi, Qigong. The most important thing I think for right now, because we're in the blessed month of Ramadan, is to even work on your spirituality. Wake up if you're not already doing so early in the morning. Go outside, look at the sky if you can, and then come back in and do some sort of wird or read a chapter of Quran, something that will help your heart. Just slowly take baby steps, and then inshallah build upon that. I don't recommend anybody doing all of these all at once because it's very overwhelming and there's a lot of information. But if you can take one thing, just use it, and mashallah, work with that and develop a habit.
So maybe those different quadrants you mentioned, to just take like one thing from each quadrant.
Yeah, one of the lifestyle, like let's say I want to work with my air environment, I want to go outside every day, get fresh air, ground myself, take my shoes and socks off, work with that, and then eventually move on to some sort of exercise routine, walking or Pilates or something like that. And then eventually work with your food, like see what kind of foods you can incorporate to kind of help you with the grief. And, work with a friend if you can, like accountability partner if you're more of a extroverted temperament. They need that. But also, melancholics and phlegmatics can also use a friend, accountability partner, that can motivate them, kind of push them through, somebody they can trust and befriend and really rely on. So if you're going through some difficulty and things like that, I would say just work with those things. Develop a habit of doing salawat every day, 100 times to 200 times. That can really help with the heart, help with the grief, help with the loss.
And lastly, since we're in Ramadan, do you have any Ramadan recommendations that are specific?
Just eat healthy if you can. Try to avoid too much fried foods, too many processed things. Sometimes we indulge in Ramadan. We get invited to different iftars. Be courteous. Eat what's in front of you, but try to balance your eating if you are not already doing so for suhoor time, eating things like making a fresh juice for yourself, making a warm tea to kind of help with your hydration. Doing things like a yogurt with cumin, for example, and adding some black seeds in it or honey in it. That can also be really good for you. Taking some time to read a portion of Quran every day, doing extra prayers if you are not already doing so in the evenings, not thinking about your trauma or not thinking about your loss so much, but saying, alhamdulillah, Allah has read this chapter for me. It's going to be a new chapter the next day, a new day tomorrow, reminding yourself, and positive self-care. I cannot mention to you, if you are following the sunnah, the prophetic way, you are already doing self-care. We don't need to go to fancy spas and those things are nice too, for the benefit of it. But, if you are following the sunnah remedies, you're following the sunnah lifestyle, you are doing self-care, you are treating yourself to a good way, and you're getting closer to Allah that way. But also positive affirmations. I work with my clients with trauma, deep traumas and things. I tell them to always think positively. Even though I'm divorced, I'm going to be okay. Tapping, EFT is very effective. Inshallah, always inserting inshallah, alhamdulillah at the end of your affirmation. Even though this, I'm going to be okay. Even though that, I'm going to be okay. This is
For
very
those who don't know what EFT is, it's emotional freedom technique, which you
technique.
can Google. And Pari, you said before that for hydration to have those high mineral salt water, right?
If you can in the morning. So for hydration, I would recommend taking some Celtic salt on your tongue because it helps with getting into the cells and it gives you magnesium. Sometimes when you just drink water and you don't with it, you can easily expel it, obviously through going to the bathroom and stuff. And sometimes people have that issue where if they're feeling very nervous or if that nervous type, they're always in the bathroom because they're drinking a lot of water, they can't keep up their hydration enough. So I would say if you're having that difficulty, for all temperaments, it's good to just put a little bit of either black salt, pink salt, or Celtic salt on your tongue, and then drink water after that. Warmer water for the colder temperaments, slightly lukewarm for the colder temperaments. Warmer water for the cold temperaments, and slightly warm to lukewarm for the colder temperaments because we're still in winter, kind of. Some days it's more colder here than other days, but and then drinking the water because that will help with your hydration. It helps relax the muscles. It gives you energy. That salt is very effective. And then having some watermelon or melon of some sort. If you're colder temper, you can have that with some dates or mix it with some, maybe honey. You can drizzle some honey with it or have some nuts with it, mix it with some almonds or walnuts to give you that warming effect.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much. Would you like to give us your information of your website, which I'll include in the YouTube video details?
Yeah, so I'm just going to pull it up. It's pureearthhealing.com. And if anybody wants to book in a session with me, they're more welcome to do so. There we go. And I do a free discovery call if you're interested in that. I don't know why my computer is acting silly, but it's not showing up all the time.
Okay, but it's pureearthhealing.com. Okay, and I'll add the details.
Yeah, and then I do a free discovery call for those who are interested. They can just tap into I just give them like basic information. But if you want to do a full consultation, you have to book for that. I do provide all these other sessions, and I'm also doing my aafiyah healing sessions for deep trauma release. So with that, I work with you. I do visualization, I do guided imagery, I do give you homework to help you. I do realignment, which helps with emotional blockages, because when the emotions are stuck in the body does not flow effectively, and that gives also rise to diseases and illnesses. So be careful with that. So I do aafiyah healing, inshallah. So.
Right. Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much. It's been very informative.
Thank you so much for having me, and inshallah, look forward to hearing back from all of you. Positive feedback or negative, please feel free to send me a message, inshallah.
Wishing you well over the rest of Ramadan.
Inshallah, jazakallah khairan. Thank you so much.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone.